The sweetest revenge, the kind that truly satisfies the soul, isn't about causing harm. It isn't about an eye for an eye. It's about opportunity. It's about being given the perfect, unexpected stage to teach someone a lesson they so desperately need to learn, a lesson they would never have learned otherwise. My name is Ethan, and I'm 50 years old now. But this story isn't about the man I am today. It's about the boy I was, and the corporate CEO who learned my name the hard way. It all started in the mid-90s, in a small town where the Friday night football games were the biggest event of the week. At 16, your options for a job were slim to none. You could mow lawns, or you could work at Peterson's Quick Mart, the only real grocery store for 30 miles. So, when I got the job, I felt like I'd won the lottery. It was more than just a paycheck. It was a ticket to independence, a place in the community. My first boss, the store manager Sarah, was the kind of manager you dream of. She saw the potential in a lanky kid who was willing to work hard. She made sure my shifts, which were mostly stocking shelves and mopping floors until the whole place gleamed, never interfered with my schoolwork or band practice. The work was honest, and it made me happy. I loved the quiet hum of the freezers at night, the satisfaction of seeing perfectly aligned cans on a shelf, knowing I'd brought order to the chaos. I poured my heart into that job. I learned every aisle, every product code, every regular customer's name. And my effort didn't go unnoticed. Sarah and our regional manager, a straight-shooting guy named David, saw my dedication. I was promoted from stock boy to cashier, where I learned the rhythm of the town through the people I served. After I graduated high school and started at a local college for music education, they promoted me again, this time to evening manager. Suddenly, I was the one in charge at night. I was reconciling the cash drawers, making the nightly deposit drops at the bank, and holding the keys to the entire store. It was a level of trust that I took incredibly seriously. I had a fantastic relationship with Sarah and David. We were a team. The Quick Mart was part of a small, regional chain of a few dozen stores, started by a man named Mr. Peterson. He was an old-school oil tycoon who'd started the stores as a way to distribute his gasoline. But he'd built an empire on a foundation of respect. The employees revered him. On the rare occasions he'd visit our store, he wouldn't just walk through. He'd stop, shake your hand, look you in the eye, and thank you for your hard work. He made you feel seen. He was a giant of a man, not in stature, but in character. But Mr. Peterson was getting on in years, working toward a well-deserved retirement. His son-in-law, a man named Mark, was being groomed to take over as CEO. And as the old guard began to fade, a new, colder wind started to blow through the company. As a teenager in the 90s, I did what many kids did. I grew my hair out. It was a sign of the times, a bit of youthful rebellion. As it got longer, David, my regional manager, pulled me aside one day. "Ethan," he said kindly, "I don't have a problem with it, but we need you looking sharp as a manager. Keep it tucked in a store cap or pull it back in a ponytail. That's all I ask." It was a perfectly reasonable request. There were no official rules about appearance or hair length in the employee handbook, but I understood the need to look professional. I was happy to oblige. I wanted to represent the store well. Then, the company decided our store was due for a major remodel. This meant the corporate bigwigs from the city started showing up more often, walking the aisles with clipboards and stern faces. Among them was a man who seemed to have stepped right out of a bygone era. Let's call him Mr. Abernathy. He was one of the good old boy executives, a man who clearly believed the world should still operate on the principles of a 1950s boardroom. The first time I saw him, he was critiquing the placement of a chip display with a sneer. He glanced over at me, my hair neatly tied back, and his eyes lingered for a moment too long, a flicker of disapproval in his gaze. He didn't say anything then, but I felt a chill. Later that week, David called me into the office. He looked uneasy. "Ethan, I need to give you a heads up," he began. "Mr. Abernathy said something to me. About your appearance." "My hair?" I asked. "I've been keeping it tied back like you said." "I know. And I told him that. I told him you're one of our best employees, and there are no company rules about it. But this guy, he's old school. He's got the new COS ear. He might be back, and if he is, just be on your best behavior. Don't give him any reason to make trouble. The warning felt ominous, a dark cloud on the horizon of my perfect job. A couple of weeks went by, and the tension faded. Then, on a busy Tuesday afternoon, he returned. In the intervening time, I had made a change. I'd spontaneously decided to cut my long hair short, but on the same day, I'd gotten both of my ears pierced with small, simple studs. Mr. Abernathy strode up to my checkout counter, where I was ringing up groceries for Mrs. Gable, one of our sweetest regulars. He slapped a manila envelope on the counter. "I need to see the manager," he barked, not even looking at me. "I'm the manager on duty," I said, maintaining a polite, professional tone. Sarah said to expect some paperwork. He finally turned his gaze on me, and his eyes narrowed, first at my face, then locking onto my ears. A slow, ugly smirk spread across his lips. "You," he scoffed, loud enough for everyone in line to hear. "You couldn't possibly be in charge. Petersons would never put someone who looks like you in a management position." The air crackled. Mrs. Gable froze, her hand hovering over her purse. I felt a hot flush of humiliation creep up my neck. "I'm sorry, sir," I said, my voice steady, despite the pounding in my chest. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, his voice a harsh whisper. "You look like a little girl with those things in your ears. This is a place of business, not a rock concert. There's no place for that here. You will take those earrings out." Immediately. This was it. The moment David had warned me about. I took a deep breath, remembering my years of service, my spotless record. "Sir," I said, keeping my voice respectful but firm. "With all due respect, there are no rules in the company handbook regarding employee appearance or earrings. I have been a trusted, model employee for several years. I am entrusted with this entire store every evening." That was the wrong thing to say. To him, it wasn't a defense, it was defiance. His face turned a blotchy red. "Are you talking back to me, boy?" he thundered. The store went silent. He jabbed a finger in my direction. "This is exactly the problem. No respect. This is insubordination." He berated me, right there in front of a line of my customers, the people I saw every day, the people who respected me. He finally shoved the paperwork across the counter, shot me a look of pure venom, and stormed out of the store. Through the glass doors, I saw him whip out a bulky 90s cell phone and start making a call. My hands were shaking. Mrs. Gable patted my arm. "Don't you mind him, Ethan," she whispered. "He's a nasty old goat." It couldn't have been 5 minutes later when the store phone rang. It was David. His voice was strained. "Ethan, he just called me. And he is furious. Tell me exactly what happened, from your perspective." I recounted the entire humiliating exchange. David sighed, a long, weary sound. "I am so sorry, kid. I'll do what I can, but this guy is on a warpath. He's painting you as some kind of defiant punk. Just hang tight." The next week was torture. Every time the phone rang, my stomach clenched. I felt like I had a target on my back. Then, the new schedule was posted. I, the evening manager, was scheduled for a 9 a.m. shift on a Saturday. My heart sank. I knew what it meant. I walked into the store that Saturday morning, and David was there, waiting for me. He didn't smile. He just gestured toward the small, cramped office. He closed the door, and the look on his face said everything. "Ethan," he started, and he looked genuinely pained. "I fought for you. I really did. But my hands are tied. I am so sorry, but I have to let you go." The words hung in the air, unreal. "Let me go? On what grounds?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Insubordination," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "Insubordination. For defending myself against a bully. For having 2 tiny pieces of metal in my ears." I felt a surge of anger, a burning sense of injustice that was entirely new to me. I've never even had a verbal warning. I said, my voice gaining strength. I'm going to fight this, David. This isn't right. He nodded slowly. I know it isn't. He did something then that I'll never forget. He turned to the laminated poster on the wall, the one with all the labor laws in tiny print, and he wrote down the number for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Here, he said, sliding the piece of paper to me. Call them. You deserve to fight this. I drove home in a daze, the world feeling tilted on its axis. I walked into my parents' house and explained the whole sordid story to my dad. He was a practical man, and his instinct was to avoid trouble. Son, are you sure you want to stir the pot with these people? Maybe it's best to just let it go and find another job. But I couldn't. It wasn't about the job anymore. It was about principle. It was about a corporate bully on a power trip and a company that was letting him get away with it. I called the EOC. The caseworker I spoke to listened patiently, and when I was done, she said, based on what you've told me, Mr. Hayes, I believe you have a very strong case for wrongful termination based on discrimination. She offered me an appointment that very afternoon in Dallas. But before I made that drive, I decided to give the company one last chance to do the right thing. I still, foolishly perhaps, believed in the company Mr. Peterson had built. I wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. I called the corporate headquarters. After a maze of receptionists and holds, I was shocked when the operator said, "Please hold for Mark, the CEO, the son-in-law, the new king." He came on the line, his voice smooth and detached. "Yes, Mr. Mark," I began, my heart pounding. "My name is Ethan Hayes. I was the evening manager at your store in town, and I was just terminated. I believe there's been a terrible misunderstanding, and I was hoping I could have just 5 minutes of your time to share my side of the story." There was a cold chuckle on the other end of the line. "Mr. Hayes, I am fully aware of the situation," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Mr. Abernathy is one of my most trusted administrators. I don't need to meet with you to understand that you were a disrespectful young brat who thought he could defy company management. The decision is final." A brat. The word hit me like a slap in the face. All my years of hard work, my dedication, my perfect record, all of it erased by one man's prejudice and another's arrogance. The last embers of hope for a reasonable solution died out. My voice turned cold and calm. "I see," I said. "Well, I just wanted to extend you the courtesy before my meeting this afternoon with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Thank you for your time." I hung up the phone before he could respond. The fight was on. The EEOC was incredible. They filed the paperwork, and the result was swift. The company was ordered to pay me my average salary for the next 6 months while the case was pending. It was a surreal victory. I was a full-time college student, and suddenly I had a steady paycheck coming in without having to work. I could pour all my energy into my music studies. It was a silver lining I hadn't expected, but the company, or rather, the CEO, couldn't let it go. His pride was wounded. Just as the 6 months were ending, I received a certified letter. The company was suing me. They were suing me for the money they had been legally ordered to pay me, doubling down on their claim that one instance of insubordination was grounds for firing. I was summoned to a conference call hearing with a labor judge. The fear was real. I was a college kid in my apartment, about to go up against a corporation with a team of lawyers. I had to tell my professor I'd be missing class for a court hearing. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, listening as 2 slick attorneys argued their case. The CEO, Mark, was on the line as well, a silent, looming presence. The company's lawyers painted me as a defiant, disrespectful employee who had flagrantly challenged a senior executive. They argued that maintaining a strict chain of command was paramount. Then, it was the judge's turn. His voice was gravelly and carried an unmistakable air of weary authority. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the company lawyers, "I have in front of me the employee handbook from the period in question. I see no mention of employee appearance, hair length, or earrings. What I do see are multiple, glowing performance reviews for Mr. Hayes from his direct manager and his regional manager. I see a young man with a spotless record. He paused, and the silence was deafening. What this looks like to me, the judge continued, his voice hardening, is a case of a senior employee abusing his authority and a company that is now making this personal. Your legal costs for this hearing alone have far exceeded the 6 months of pay you are trying to claw back. This is petty. He delivered his ruling with the finality of a gavel strike. The lawsuit was dismissed. I was to keep the money. The company was advised not to pursue the matter further. I could hear the stunned silence from the other end of the line. I had won. Again. But that wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge was quieter, more subtle, and infinitely more satisfying. After my job-free semester, I needed work. I applied at a massive electronics retail giant, a place we'll call Mega Circuit. During my final interview, the HR manager asked about the firing on my record. I told her the whole story. She listened, fascinated, a slow smile spreading across her face. Well, she said, our corporate policy does prohibit men from wearing earrings on the sales floor. Would you have a problem with that? Absolutely not, I said. If it's an established, written policy, I will follow it without question. I was going to be a teacher soon anyway. It was a battle I no longer needed to fight. I got the job, and I thrived. It was the dawn of the HD TV era. Plasma screens and massive projection TVs were the hottest new tech, and they were expensive. Most of the sales staff didn't understand the technology and couldn't answer the complex questions customers had before dropping $4,000 or $5,000. I made it my mission to learn everything. I became the store's go-to expert. I was working on commission, and my paychecks were bigger than anything I'd ever imagined. One day, a kind, older couple came in. They wanted the best of everything, but needed to understand it all first. I spent nearly 2 hours with them, explaining aspect ratios, input lag, and the difference between component and composite video. There was something naggingly familiar about the gentleman. When they decided to buy the top-of-the-line system, I took their name and address for the delivery. My pen froze over the paper. It was Mr. Peterson, the original owner of the grocery store chain, the kind man who had built the company on respect. He was out of his usual suit, dressed casually, and I hadn't recognized him. His wife was wonderfully sweet. You are just fantastic, young man, she said. We're giving our children money to buy these new TVs for the holidays, and I am going to insist they all come here and speak with you personally. A few weeks later, during the holiday rush, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit strode into my department. He looked impatient and important. I'm looking for Ethan, he announced to a younger colleague. My in-laws, the Petersons, said he was the man to talk to. My colleague pointed him in my direction. The man turned, and my heart stopped. It was Mark, the CEO, the man who had called me a brat, who had approved my firing, who had tried to sue me. The man who, in all likelihood, did not remember my face. 1,000 emotions swirled through me. Shock, white-hot anger, and then a sudden, icy calm. An opportunity had just landed in my lap. The perfect opportunity. I walked toward him, extending my hand with a warm, professional smile. I'm Ethan Hayes, I said. I'm happy to help you. My hands trembled slightly as I shook his, but I masked it. He launched into his needs, mentioning how his in-laws couldn't stop talking about the brilliant young expert who had helped them. I answered every question flawlessly. I explained the benefits of a progressive scan player, the importance of high-quality cabling. I upsold him on a state-of-the-art surround sound system. I was the consummate professional, the expert he so desperately needed. He was profusely grateful. It's just impossible to find this level of service and reliable information these days, he gushed, pulling out his credit card. You've been a tremendous help. It's my pleasure, I said, running his card. I take a lot of pride in my work. I handed him the receipt to sign. Then, I reached into my wallet, pulled out one of the crisp business cards I rarely used, and handed it to him. If you or your family need anything else at all, please Please don't hesitate to come back and see me. He took the card, glanced at it casually, and then his eyes locked onto the name printed in bold, black ink. Ethan Hayes, home theater specialist. He froze. His gaze slowly lifted from the card, traveling up to my face. He stared into my eyes, and I watched the gears turn. I saw the flicker of confusion, the frantic search through his memory, and then the sickening, dawning wave of recognition. The blood drained from his face. His confident, CEO smirk evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure horror. He knew. In that instant, he knew. He wasn't looking at Ethan the electronics expert. He was looking at Ethan the stock boy, Ethan the insubordinate manager, Ethan the brat he had tried to crush. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze with a calm, unwavering, professional smile. There was a long, suffocating silence. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He finally turned, almost stumbling over his own feet, and walked away. At the edge of the department, he stopped and turned back, taking one last, long look at me, the ghost of his past, the living embodiment of his arrogant, petty mistake. I never knew what he was thinking, but I like to imagine that in that moment, he realized the profound truth. He hadn't fired a punk. He had fired a dedicated, respectable young man who took pride in his work, solely because of his own blind prejudice. And that young man had just become his indispensable expert. He didn't lose his job. I didn't cost him a penny, but I gave him something far more valuable. A lesson. A lesson in humility, in character, and in the simple fact that you never, ever know when the brat you step on today will be the person you need to look up to tomorrow. And that, my friends, was the best revenge of all.